There's not to make you mad. There's not to lead fight. There's not to do die. It's all in death.
So, welcome everybody. He is probably Lincolnshire's most famous son. Well, Isaac Newton maybe. Don't mention Margaret Thatcher. But he's towered over the cathedral, or underneath the cathedral, and towered over me since 1905. And today I'm going to go to where he was born, where his blue plaque is, and talk about the man who is said to have been the most photographed man of the Victorian era. And just to emphasise that, at the beginning, the intro, is his voice, which I didn't know existed until I did research for this. It was on an old wax cylinder, and it was state-of-the-art technology, and Tennyson was on his deathbed when he did it. And they wanted his voice for posterity because of how important he was. But I hope you enjoy the video. We'll be at Somersby, where he was born. Please like and subscribe. Now, it was in this tiny hamlet of Somersby in Lincolnshire where Tennyson was born. He was born in that house. Which is at the rectory. His dad, excuse the lighting, his dad was the rector of this church. Now, he was born into a massive house, massive household. At one point in the 1820s in the house, there was over 20 people living in there. Now, Alfred Tennyson's father, who was the rector of this church, had epilepsy and bipolar. And in 19th century England, that was quite taboo. I could argue that it still is to this day. Not a lot known about it. Bit of a stigma about it. But in 19th century England, it was a huge deal. His father would get aggressive mood swings, and this would make his home life very uncomfortable for Alfred Tennyson. In that church, when it was doing renovations in 2015, they found graffiti in the belfry, which was AT 1934. Which was the year he left here for good. And there's a big conspiracy, well, not conspiracies, but a big story about did he leave graffiti here. It was only found a couple of years ago. In there is lots of Tennyson stuff, but as everything at the moment, you can't get in. They do open days and stuff, but today isn't one of them. I'm going to take you to Louth. To where he went to school, because there's a little blue plaque, and I'll meet you back here in a moment. So, it was here where Tennyson's brief spell of Louth education started and ended. He attended this school and hated it. He was bullied by the pupils, and he hated the headmaster, Mr. Waite. I'll show you his blue plaque. Now, from here he would leave education, and he wouldn't return until he went to Cambridge University in 1827. It was while at Cambridge University, and he was hoping to win the Chancellor's Gold Award. He met Arthur Hallam. He won that award, Tennyson, by the way. He would meet Arthur Hallam, who would become his best friend of his life. And Arthur Hallam would get engaged to Emily, Tennyson's sister. He would visit the rectory and spend lots of days. But in 1933 he would very suddenly die, and this scarred Tennyson, and he wrote one of his most enduring and lasting poems, In Memoriam. When it was originally released, it wasn't too well received, and he wouldn't write for another 10 years, or publish for 10 years. But it now stands as one of his greatest bits of work. So, find me back to the rectory. So that's just a little bit outside the church about the Tennyson trail. I'm only taking you on a couple of bits today, and that's his house where he lived there. He left university when his father died. He's buried in there, and I hate not moving about. And he would come to look after his widowed mother and all the children that lived here. But he would leave here forever in 1834 or 1837, never to come back. When Wordsworth died in 1850, he would become Queen Victoria's Poet Laureate, and she would say she helped her so much to get over the death of Albert. All his poetry just helped her so much. But this tiny remote place in Lincolnshire, one of the most famous people to come from the Victorian era came from. I'm going to take you to one last place, to where he wrote a poem, like a little location he wrote a poem, and I'll tell you why the story of Tennyson I find so interesting. There is this brook that inspired the poem The Brook, and this has become like a little touristy attraction for people on the Tennyson trail. He left this area in the 1830s, but it would always stay with him. He would always talk about the Lincolnshire wolds. He would always keep his Lincolnshire twang. He would keep that Lincolnshire twang in his voice. You would hear at the start of in the intro to this video. It's really unusual to hear somebody's voice from the Victorian era, but this goes to show the celebrity that Tennyson had. Tennyson is widely regarded as the first celebrity. He was hoarded, he was bombarded. Tennyson grew up in the Industrial Revolution, and being one of the most famous things to come from the Industrial Revolution would of course be this, the camera. And he was like, there's so many photographs of Tennyson, and it's unusual from the Victorian era to have one person have so many pictures and the such like. This kind of like Charles Dickens died. Charles Dickens and Tennyson were friends, and at the funeral, Tennyson would turn up, and it became a bit like a circus because Tennyson was there, so everybody wanted to see Tennyson. This is kind of the point to his celebrity, like he was bigger than Dickens. People like Dickens and the Brontes, they probably are more fondly remembered in history. That's the wrong term. Their work's more renowned now. I think that's mainly because they're novelists, and Tennyson's poetry was really long. I was quite into poetry when I was a teenager, and I must admit Tennyson wasn't my personal favourites, and I tried because he was from my home. I prefer more 20th century poetry. That's neither here nor there. But there's lots of pictures of Tennyson, which is unusual. His celebrity was very high. It kind of bred into what would be the 20th century and celebrity culture as we know it. But Tennyson was the first, and I find that so fascinating. He was the man that did the words that spoke to the English public. He was the poet laureate. He wrote The Charge of the Light Brigade, a poem that is very well regarded to this day, along with In Memoriam. He wrote for soldiers, he wrote for the common man, and he was beloved because of this. And I would have shared some pictures of Tennyson while I've been talking about his celebrity. But this is the Lincolnshire Wolds. That was the brook which inspired the poem. It's a beautiful spot in Lincolnshire. If you ever get a chance, if you're into Tennyson, there's a lot more of the trail you can do. You can go to Mablethorpe. He's got a poem called Mablethorpe. He would go there on his summer holidays, and he loved Mablethorpe. But yeah, there's a lot more of the trail to do. I'm going to take you back to Lincoln, and I'm going to wrap up this story. So I'm still here, chilling out with Tennyson and his dog. He was put there in 1905, and look at this picture of the unveiling. How interesting is that? He lived until his 80s, and in Victorian era the average age expectancy was 50s, so he lived 30 years past life expectancy. I've had really good time exploring the history of Tennyson and going through some of his work. I've not read his work since I was a kid, so it's quite interesting to go back. If you have enjoyed Doggy, please like and subscribe. Do you remember that from one of my old videos? Weird stuff. Please like and subscribe, and I'll see you very soon. In a couple of days I've got a new video. So it's first thing in the morning. I need tea so bad. Have a great day. Peace.